Hello, and welcome back to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian worldviews and values. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Psalm 144. Not going to be a pre-recorded bio, but if you want to skip it, you can skip to probably around 3 minutes in. It should get you pretty close to the body of the topic. As always, I am your host, Michael Melito. First and foremost, I'm a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one. I hope to recognize that in everything that I do, and this podcast is no different. Grew up hunting and shooting at a very early age. I'm looking up above the microwave. There's a picture of me in a very pitiful fort that I built, holding a rifle, and I'm maybe 4 years old, maybe 5. I have no idea. But a skinny little blonde-haired kid sitting under a pretty pathetic fort with a little rifle slung over his shoulder. Grew up hunting and shooting at a very early age. Started competition shooting even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17. Did a couple of combat tours in Iraq in the infantry, assaultman. After my combat tours, I was an urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I taught different aspects of urban warfare and desert warfare. I've served as a police officer. I worked for LAPD, where I worked regular assignments and a more specialized assignment. Did several years in law enforcement. I also served in the U.S. Army, both full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a private contractor for a 3-letter government agency that I won't specify. I have been a professional big game hunter and guide, slaying all manner of beasts, whether to put meat on the table for recreation or professionally. From wolves to bear to elk to white-tailed deer to mule deer to gray squirrels to prairie dogs to cottontails and jackrabbits. I've been blessed to slay all manner of beasts, and I don't apologize for that either. Been blessed to hunt all over this beautiful country and even hunt all manner of exotic species of different sorts. As I alluded to, even before I joined the Marine Corps at 17, I started competition shooting. I'm a state rifle and pistol champion a few times over. I've won more shooting competitions than I can remember. I've been very blessed, and I try to use the talents that God's given me. FBI certified and NRA certified and a bunch of other certifications, firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years. Again, blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and my fingers for battle. Everything that I've done, all the endurance and suffering that I've been through, God's gotten me through it. All the talents and discipline that I have is a blessing from God, not from myself alone. I would have nothing if God didn't give it to me. With that, let's get into today's topic. Gunfighting in 2022. Okay, so I guess I'll start off with the big thing. I'm not one to bury the lead. Optical sights on handguns. Now, if you've listened since the beginning, you'll know that I was kind of a troglodyte, kind of stuck in the past when it came to red dots on handguns. I was against them. I never thought they would catch on, and perhaps that was my own romanticism of all the years that I've spent shooting and mastering iron sights. I didn't want it to be true that red dots would take over on handguns. But I was wrong. I was wrong on that. Red dots, I believe, have gotten to the point where they are as rugged and reliable as iron sights on handguns. If you get if you get a very good and well-made one. Now, do they break? Yes. But to be fair, iron sights break. I've seen plenty of iron sights break. I've seen plenty of iron sights lose 0 on handguns. If you drop your handgun, which if you gunfight and are a professional gunfighter and train a lot, you will eventually drop your handgun. I don't think it's a matter of if, but when. And iron sights break. Iron sights get damaged. I've seen it. And may a red dot break? Yes, but so also may an iron sight break, so that's not really a valid argument. And it took me a long time to embrace the red dot, and for the last several months I've been experimenting. I did what I would advise all of you to do if you're interested in it, is put one on a .22 handgun as I encourage most people, if they're practicing, to do a majority of their practice, especially nowadays with ammo costs, with the dry fire number 1 and with a 22 handgun number 2. Put a red dot on a 22. Run the crap out of it. See how you like it. Adjust to it. But I had to admit, this year, after several months of messing with them, I reluctantly had to admit that it was better. I can be as accurate with good iron sights at 25, 50 yards as I can with a red dot. I can, but it takes me so much longer. There's so many more things to do and so many more things to maintain to get that level of accuracy. I can get the same amount of accuracy much quicker, much more intuitively with an iron sight. And keep in mind, this is somebody who has been, like I said, competition shooting and working with iron sights, since the late 80s, early 90s. As I said, I started shooting at a very early age. I started competition shooting in the 90s. Won my first state championship. It was either late 90s or 2000 or thereabouts. 2000 and 2001. It was late 90s, early 2000s when I won my first state championship, gold medal. And that was with iron sights, and I have a lot of experience with iron sights, and I still do a majority of my practice, I'd say, with iron sights. I think you should know how to shoot iron sights well. Just like I advise people that are into rifles. Optics have kind of been the way on those for a lot longer, but I still encourage you to master iron sights. But back to the topic at hand. I think that iron sights are going to be less prevalent and optics are going to become more prevalent on handguns. And like I said, I was wrong on that. I should have embraced it. I've been fighting it for probably a decade. I probably should have jumped on that a little bit sooner and not been so against it. Just because you want something to be true doesn't make it true. The truth is the truth, and the truth should stand up to scrutiny. And when I ran the red dot, I realized that it was, in fact, better. It was faster to be as accurate. And I am as accurate with much less practice on the red dots. And I, by God's grace, will become even more accurate than I was with iron sights with a red dot. And become better. It doesn't matter that I've been shooting for X amount of years and so long and won so many competitions. You should always, as a gunfighter in that profession, or as an alpha male, if you listen to the Alpha Male podcast, you should always be pushing yourself to be the best you can be and be better and better. Never be stuck in a rut. Never be satisfied. Always be hungry to be better, to be a better man, to be a better gunfighter. And I think that admitting that, and just a small portion of that with iron sights and red dots. Now, do I think that red dots, I say red dots because I'm old school. Originally, they were red dots. Now it's just optical sights because there's so many. One of the ones that I have on my STI is not even a red dot. It's a green triangle. But those optical sights on handguns, are they the best for every situation? I'm going to say no. There are still certain situations and for certain people to whom they are not. If you think that you're let's just say a mediocre handgun shooter and you put a red dot on it and you're going to be awesome, it doesn't fix the fundamentals. If you flinch with iron sights, you're probably going to flinch just as bad with a red dot or with an optical sight. If you don't know the fundamentals, the optical sight's really not going to help you. I saw the same thing probably a decade ago with lasers, when lasers were a hot thing, when everybody was going to lasers, and I was against lasers, and on that one I think I was right. Lasers kind of are useless for all but the very niche of applications. But people would think that because they put a laser on their guns, now suddenly they would be awesome with a handgun, and that's not how it works. There are several advantages to an optical sight, but I think that for most people, if you're going to practice little, it takes more practice, I would say, to become proficient, especially in defensive situations. If you're talking about group shooting, probably not. But if you're talking about drawing and acquiring the red dot, in my opinion, and maybe it's because I have decades of experience with iron sights, it's easier and faster to acquire the iron sights. So I would say it's only for you if you're going to put the time and dedication to the defensive use of optical sights on handguns. I would also say if you live in a really sweaty, dirty, nasty environment, And if you're the kind of person that's going to carry your carry gun all the time and not maintain it, which is fine, there's a lot of people like that, then the optical sight's probably not for you. If that red dot gets nasty or dirty or wet, that can cause issues. So it requires, I believe, probably a higher level of maintenance than would be just, let's take the most common, probably concealed gun, handgun in America, the Glock 19. If you take that and you take the Glock 19 with a red dot and you're carrying those, you're probably going to have to maintain the Glock 19 with the red dot more, because that's one more thing to maintain. That just makes sense. So maybe it's not for you. If you're doing real deep concealed carry, maybe not for you, because that's another snag point, depending on how you carry. You know, if you're a pocket carrier, that may out the red dot optical sight, at least for now, unless they do have some new really cool ones that I've seen, and I really like the Delta Point, not the Delta Point, maybe it's the Micro, whatever the really small Leopold is that comes, it's basically the size of a big rear sight. That thing's pretty cool. But most of the time, if you're going with an optical sight, you're going to lose that pocket ability or that super deep concealment. So I don't think they're the best for every situation, but I think they are the way of the future, and I'm trying to embrace that. So I have one on my 22 that I've been running, and I have one on my STI that I've been running. And if you've been listening, you know that I'm on the quest for the next carry gun. I will likely mount one on that. I actually am looking for, my next one will be one that I can mount an optic on it. So I would say my advice to you, if you want to get into that world, put it on a handgun, a 22, and practice with it. Don't trust your life to something unproven, and that goes for your own equipment. Don't just think that you're going to be able to throw a red dot on there and just start carrying it without practicing with it. Okay, next, in 2022, are Glocks still relevant? Now, this may cause some controversy even more than the red dot. Are Glocks still relevant? I would say they are obsolescent. They are kind of on the back burner. I think the only thing that keeps them around is that so many law enforcement and military uses them. But there are so many polymer striker fire handguns that do everything that the Glock will do and do some things better. You know, I don't know of anybody that would take an out of the box Glock 17 and out of the box HK VP9. If you gave them both those guns side by side and had them shoot them, it would be hard pressed for me to imagine somebody would like the Glock more than the HK or than, a CZ-P10 if we're just talking about striker fire polymer handguns. There are so many good offerings. The one advantage that the Glock still has, it is such a big chunk of the market that there's so much aftermarket support for them. But, if you get a Glock, my argument is if you get a Glock 19 and you change the sights on it and you change the trigger in it and you change the grip on it and you do a bunch of other stuff to it, is it still a Glock 19? Or you have basically done the same thing that another manufacturer would have done from the start. Since the patent on the Gen 3 Glocks is expired, there are a lot of companies that make Glock clones. And some of them do it cheaper. And some of them, I would argue, do it far better with far better guns like Shadow Systems and things like that. So is the Glock still relevant? I would say it's not a bad choice, but I have a Glock 17 sitting in my bottom drawer of my dresser that I can't remember the last time that I shot. I still keep it because if I go to a training class with a lot of new shooters, I want them to see me run what I would consider one of the basic bare bones guns. It's just a Glock 17 it's got night sights, but they're factory option night sights, factory trigger. And I like to see them use that instead of, a super high-end 2011, because I know that it's the shooter that makes far bigger difference than the gun, but they might not think that. So I have it for that reason. I basically have it to slum it. It's still a good gun. It's still reliable, but it's hard pressed for me to think of a situation where I would take that gun over anything else. If I was looking for rugged reliability, I would still take the Beretta, my Wilson Combat Beretta 92, because in my opinion, it's as reliable and as rugged and far, better to shoot. So, is the Glock, like the factory Glock, still relevant in 2022? Is it still going to be relevant? I would say it's still probably a good choice for somebody getting into handguns, or for somebody that wants a handgun that just wants one. Some people, and I don't agree with this, but some people think that a handgun is like a security blanket. They just get it, and by proxy it makes them safer because it's in their vicinity. I don't agree with that, but for somebody that just wants a handgun or just starting out, maybe they'll get that and they'll shoot it, and then they'll realize they want something different. So I would say it's a good entry handgun. They do still work. They are still reliable. I'd say they're still relevant for somebody that just wants a gun that wants to be semi-proficient and wants a very durable gun for a very austere environment. I'd say they're still relevant for that. Which brings me to my next point, which would be, are hammer-fired guns still relevant? With all the really good polymer striker-fire handguns, if you've ever felt the Glock trigger and you felt some of the newer striker-fire or polymer handgun triggers, striker-fire polymer handgun triggers like the 320, the 365, the CZP-10, the Walther PDP, which just came out, the Walther, Q5 matches. Those triggers are so much better than a factory Glock trigger, in my opinion. The HKVP9 may be one of the best. Is with a polymer striker-fire triggers being so good, are hammer-fired guns relevant at all? Because they're more, let's face it, they're more complex. So why would you have that added complexity? I would say they are still relevant, because as good as the polymer striker-fire handgun triggers get, they're not as crisp or not as clean as a good hammer-fired gun. They still have not made, even in the most premium, I've never felt in the most premium of even aftermarket triggers for a striker-fire handgun, even the ones that I've done myself and done a very good job on, they are very good. They are still, in my opinion, not as good as a good, not even an excellent, just a good hammer-fired gun, like a single action pull on a Beretta 92, or the gold standard that's been there for 100 years, a good 1911 trigger. Not even an excellent 1911 trigger, a good 1911 trigger. It's not just about the weight. It's about a crisp, clean break. That whole thing about shooting to reset? I don't ever remember that coming about until Glocks became a thing, because the Glock trigger was so long and so mushy and so bad. You had to kind of learn a different way to shoot it fast and effectively, which is to shoot to reset. You don't generally have to worry about that if you're shooting a 1911, because there really isn't much of any. So are hammer-fired guns still relevant? I would say yes, absolutely. For top-tier people, for the expert shooter, for the master of his craft, or for somebody that wants to master his craft, I would say that the hammer-fired guns are still very much relevant. Which brings me to a sad thing, is that since most people nowadays in the American market want a polymer striker-fire handgun, a Glock or a Glock clone, it's really hard to find the hammer-fired guns that are made for red dots. There are a few options, but there are not nearly as many as there are for the polymer striker-fired, which kind of sucks. Maybe that will change in the future, or maybe, that's going to remain a very niche thing. Which brings me to the final thing I'm going to talk about, probably as a point of this episode. We'll talk about things in conclusion. But are revolvers, and especially the snub-nose revolver, still relevant in 2022? If I'm making the argument that the Glocks are becoming kind of obsolescent with the things like the 320s and the HKVP9s and the things that are proven, the FN509s, the Shadow Systems guns, then how could a 5-round 38 Specialist 357 snub-nose still be relevant? Well, I would say that it is still relevant. And I would not recommend it for a new shooter, as a lot of people do. I would not recommend it for most women, like a lot of people do. I would recommend it for somebody that's going to dedicate. The snub-nose revolver is a master's handgun. It takes a lot more to master. But I would say it is still relevant for somebody in deep concealment. It is still relevant for somebody that wants a small, compact, powerful handgun. It is still one of my go-to EDC guns. You know, I have a lot of really nice, I'm blessed to have a lot of really nice handguns. But I'm probably not going to work out with an STI 2011. I work out routinely with my 357 Magnum snub nose that weighs, I think 11 or 14 ounces, I forget. The Smith & Wesson 360 PD, 357 Magnum. I generally will work out or go running with that gun. And I know people will say the SIG 365, and I've played around with those, but I'm probably not shoving that in my pocket the way that I am with the snub-nose revolver. And revolvers, the snub-nose do still have some advantages over something like a 365 in CQB in close quarters battle. You can shove the muzzle right up against something, and I don't want to get too graphic, but you can shove the muzzle deep into something, and that gun will still function just fine. It won't go out of battery. If you do that with a semi-automatic, the gun will not fire. Since it's, steel or titanium usually, it makes a good blunt object if you need to hit something with it. Now, I'm not going to say that revolvers never malfunction or ever jam. That's an old myth. Revolvers do malfunction and jam, and when they do, it's generally catastrophic. But they are very reliable. They have been used for, well over 100 years, and they have proven themselves to be just fine for defensive use. And another good thing about the revolver is they generally have round contours, which means I can get away with wearing them in something where I can't carry a bigger gun. And people will say, oh, just carry a bigger gun. And you're talking to a guy that carries an STI 2011 or a full-size 1911 probably the majority of my waking hours, especially at work, on work days. But, like I said, I'm not probably going to Planet Fitness or Snap Fitness or whatever gym with an STI on my hip, even in the state that I live in that's very, very gun-friendly. If I'm going running down the city, I'm probably not going running with an STI. And I say STI because I'm old school. It's staccato for the new people, if you want to look that up. But I will go running with my Smith & Wesson 357 because I put it in a little square black case and it looks like I'm running with a cell phone. Nobody has ever batted an eye at that. Nobody's ever batted an eye at the gym when I put it in my pocket. Or if I carry it in my gym bag that weighs almost nothing compared to a lot of other guns. So I'd say they are still relevant for deep concealment for things like that. So just some of my thoughts on the gunfighting coming up in the year of 2022. Just my thoughts, guys. Thanks for listening. And you never know what's going to come out at SHOT Show. Maybe they'll come out with some cool new thing that we'll talk about. And maybe we'll do a whole nother episode when SHOT Show comes out. I may or may not go to SHOT Show this year. But I think you're going to start seeing, red dots, optical sights on handguns become more and more prevalent. I think you'll see that as more of a factory option on a lot of handguns. It's already starting to go that way. Hopefully, by God's grace, ammo will get better this year than it has been. If you like this content, you want to support, consider going to goodshepherdtraining.com, scrolling down to Patreon. If you like this podcast, and we also like the Alpha Male podcast, and if you care about the important stuff, you can check out Simple Man Sermons, the preachings of a simple man called by God to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review of the podcast if you haven't already. And as a thank you for staying tuned to the end of the episode, put out a tactical tip. 2 rolls of duct tape. Now, I generally keep 2 rolls of duct tape. I've got them sitting right next to me right now. They're generally on the dashboard of my car. I brought them inside to do something with them. Hopefully, I'll remember to put them back in my car. But a roll of camouflage duct tape and a roll of very brightly obnoxious colored duct tape, whether that's bright orange, which is what I have, or bright yellow, or freaking bright green, whatever color you want, chartreuse. But a camo, or I guess OD green would work too, and a bright color of duct tape. Because sometimes you're going out hiking or hunting or something like that, and you want something bright colored in case you drop it. A lot of things that I do, I'm trying to teach my dog to hunt, my Rhodesian Ridgeback, puppy that I have, and when I take him out in the wilderness, I will just pull a piece of that duct tape off and stick it on him so that I can see a bright orange stripe when he's walking around in case he wanders off. Bought a couple of big ferrocerium rods to put on my scouting belt when I go out hiking and reconnoitering. So recently the reason I brought them in the house was I put a strip of that orange duct tape on the back end of the ferrocerium rod in case it falls out and I'll see it. Or in case I'm making a fire in the dark and I set it aside, it'll make it more likely that I'll remember to pick it back up again. And for the opposite reason, a roll of camo duct tape. Sometimes you want things camouflaged. Sometimes you want things to blend in. I think, especially in the tactical world, prepper world, we can get a little too focused on camouflage and being the gray man, and you always want stuff to blend in. But sometimes you want to stand out, especially if you want to get rescued. So I think it's good to have both. The camouflage for stuff that you want to camouflage, anything that's bright and shiny. If you go out hunting and you realize you have something that's bright and shiny, to the top of your steel water bottle, or a zipper that is flapping around making noise and shining, put a piece of camo duct tape on it, and then there you go. It makes it easier to pull, for one, and it hides it and makes it not make noise, number two. So for a variety of reasons, those two things, keep them in your car, keep them in your bag, whatever. Roll of camo duct tape, a roll of brightly colored duct tape. Anyway, that's a tactical tip for the day, guys. Thanks for listening and have a blessed day.